Hello and welcome to Tuesday. I know it's 3 p.m. on the East Coast, but this is UK week, so we're broadcasting live with all United Kingdom guests. We're going to have a great time talking about beer in the UK and all the amazing things. So hello across the pond. I know it's around 8 o'clock for you guys. We're excited you're here. Let me bring in our guest for today, Natalya Watson. She is a podcast of Beers with Nat and the author of Taste the Evolution and 50 Styles. Natalya, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's exciting to have you here because, again, like we talked about pre-show, you're the first guest across the pond outside the United States. So this is an honor for us to have you on. So we're really excited. But before we get into all your background, everything you're doing, and talk about all the great things about the UK beer scene, and the most important thing of every happy hour is the actual happy part of that hour, which is the beer. And so, Natalya, what are you drinking tonight on your side across the pond?
So I have a Gosa called TV Party from Lost and Grounded Brewers in Bristol. It is the perfect beer for right now. As we've already talked about, it's over 90 degrees here. I don't even know what that is in Celsius, but as you can tell, I'm from the States. So it's so toasty. My flat is roasting, but this Gosa is like that nice bit of spritzy tartness, quite lemony, that nice sort of doughy sweetness underneath it all. It's just what I need for right now. So yeah, it's tasting great.
Awesome. Well, it just, even though that you're so far away from where I'm located, it's still like 90 degrees where I am. So I think this heat wave is taking over the world. I'm drinking, this is the Spirit Fowl. This is a beer from Modern Times collaboration with State Fair Collaborative. Nice. And I know I've had this beer before. If you follow me on Untappd, I checked it in yesterday. If you're watching last week, I've lost power for about a whole week. So this is the only thing that was left in my fridge that is semi-decent that I may not explode in my hand when I open it. So
oh my goodness.
I'm hopeful this is going to be okay and doesn't spray in my face when I open this. But if you're out there now, why don't you crack open your beer and get a chance to check into Untappd at home. It's a great venue to kind of show what's happening out there, as well as telling everyone that you're being safe by checking in at your home, which is the most important part. I also give you an opportunity to see what people are drinking around you and get a really good badge for that perspective. So I raised our glass and everyone can joke. I did a good pour this time. No one make fun of me about this. All good. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, now we got the beer out of the way, which will be consistent during this conversation. But Natalya, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started in the beer industry, and what your writing looks like.
Yeah, so I've had a rather roundabout journey into beer, but I think many people have, which is kind of a fun thing, to do these conversations and learn everybody else's history. So I used to work in baby food before I came to beer. So before all of that, I studied microbiology at UCLA. And I should say, I'm on UK week as I live in the UK now. And I do apologize, I don't have a British accent, but I grew up in Northern Ireland. And I can put on a Northern Irish accent if you'd like, but maybe after a bit more to drink.
Exactly.
So yeah, I grew up in Northern Ireland as a kid. Then my family moved to California. And so I lived in the States for many years and then moved back to the UK 5 years ago to get into beer. So when I was in the States, I was there for school and I went to UCLA. I studied microbiology. I thought, well, relevant to these times, that I would save the world from infectious disease. And that's why I was studying microbiology. Wow. Turns out, though, I wasn't actually very good at doing science. I was much better at talking about it. So that then led me to pursue a master's in public health, where I focused on food safety and nutrition in particular, and kind of how to talk about it with people. I thought I wanted to do policy. I interned in DC for a summer, realized policy wasn't for me. So then I decided I want to work in a place where I can, talk to people about food safety, and people who are interested in food safety in America are new parents. So that's what led me to the baby food company. But the pivotal thing that happened in grad school is I was at UC Berkeley. I lived very nearby a place called Bobby G's Pizzeria, if anybody knows it, on University Avenue. They always have Deschutes, Mirror Pond, and Pliny on draft. I did not know how good I had it then, but I had some friends introduce me to beer. Then I moved to New York City for the baby food job, used beer as my way to get to know the city, and kind of just fell in love with beer from there. So thanks to my friends introducing me to it, and then actually going to every borough in New York to visit a brewery and volunteering at beer festivals and learning to homebrew with friends, I just got more and more into it to the point where I was like, okay, after 3 years, I'm going to quit the baby food job and move to London and see if I can get a job in beer. And I'm still here 5 years later. So I got my start behind the bar at Mother Kelly's in Bethnal Green. Then through this amazing group of women here in the UK called the Crafty Beer Girls. So either women who work in beer or love beer. It's this amazing social network. So through them, I found a job at Duvel, the Belgian brewery, and worked for them for 3.5 years as their UK marketing manager. And then just last May, I went freelance, And I then, after passing my certified Cicerone, passed my advanced Cicerone earlier this year and wrote a book, which has just come out. So I'm like all beer all the time. I just want to talk to people about beer and hopefully get them to love it as much as I do.
Well, we definitely picked the right guest on the show if you want to talk about beer all the time, because that's what we're going to do. Obviously the Cicerone is something that many people out there know about, but talk us through, what it means to be an advanced Cicerone. It's a huge achievement, and congratulations for doing that. Talk us a little bit about how that process got kicked off and some of the details around it.
Yeah, so I went, as I was kind of getting into beer, so Cicerone, of course, has 4 levels. And so I did my level 1, the certified beer server, which is a 60-question online multiple choice exam that you can take from anywhere. I did that in New York before I left as kind of my okay, I've got a certificate. When I want to go work behind the bar, they'll believe me that I know my stuff. So that's where I got started. And then after that, having just always really had an interest in education. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher. So I'm like, you can't teach until you know the stuff, until, at an expert level. So I wanted to just keep pursuing more knowledge. And so then when I was at Duvel, I started studying for the certified, and I took and passed that in January of 2017. And after that, I really had my sights set on pushing myself to the next level after the advanced came out. And it is one tricky exam. So the certified is a half-day exam where you've got 3 hours of writing, you've got a 45-minute tasting component, and then a demo. The advanced is 2 of those in a day. Whoa. So you do your interview, and you have an interview component as well. So you do an interview, 3 hours of essays, a 45-minute tasting portion, lunch, another interview, 3 hours of essays, and a tasting portion. So it really pushes things to the next level, covering the 5 pillars that all Cicerone exams cover. So keeping and serving, beer ingredients and processes, styles, beer flavor and evaluation, and then beer and food pairing. So it just really goes to that next level. I spent 3 months pretty much dedicated to studying. So reading, doing blind tastings, prepping different beer and food pairings at home. So yeah, I was convinced I failed. And it turns out I got my results on January 10th of this year. So I took it in November. So it takes a little while to grade. Plus we had Thanksgiving and Christmas. Right. And I got my results in January, the day that my author copy of my brand new book, my debut book, arrived in the post. So that's was awesome. Over the moon. What an amazing day. So yes, it's very challenging, but it's so rewarding. And if anyone wants to, get help on their path, I'm more than happy to answer questions about it as well. Awesome. Very, very cool. If you join us today, we're talking to Natalya Watson, who is an advanced Cicerone author, all things beer. You're joining us during UK week. So if you want to ask Natalya a question, use the chat on your device, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. And let's put her in the hot seat, even though she's already hot to begin with, because it's at 90 degrees, or as we heard in the chat channel here, 30 degrees centigrade. There we go. Thank you for whoever translated it. Exactly. So yeah, use the chat. We'll be happy to answer some of those questions and put them on the screen. I'll get started here, obviously, with some of the questions. You talked about the book, The Taste of the Evolution in 50 Styles. What was the inspiration for that book, and how did you go about figuring out that's what you want to write about? Yeah, so the inspiration was really my exams. I was studying for the Certified Cicerone, the Advanced Cicerone, and I was learning all these fascinating stories about different beer styles and how they tied together. And they were either buried at the bottom of a style description on BJCP or, in some very big history text. And I just wanted to bring them all to the surface and share them in ways that were just these sort of short little stepping stones through the history of beer to help make beer make sense. So I use the lens of beer's 4 main ingredients. So we've got a look at how malt changed over history, how water has changed in our understanding of it, then hops, then yeast. And each section is only 3 pages at the most. So they really are these little tiny taster stories with a beer to taste in each section. So you've got 50 beers to taste in total. And some of the things I cover are basically Czech Pilsner comes first as our first pale lager. But then it inspired the German Pilsner. And then it inspired the American pre-Prohibition lager, which then morphed into the California Common. And so you may think, oh, how do I tell all these different lager styles apart? But as you learn their history and how one has knocked on to the next, they all start making sense. So that's what I'm hoping to get across. And I'm ready for my plug. Here it is. Go right ahead. Here, Taste the Evolution in 50 Styles. And it's so beautifully illustrated. A woman named Sarah Greeno did the illustrations, and it's this kind of Art Deco look. And I'm so proud of it. I'm so pleased. And I've got some lovely feedback. I love the cover. It looks really great on the cover there. That's pretty awesome from that perspective there. And one of the questions that we get asked a lot, and the people from England and other areas, is the beer scene that's been growing over in the UK. Now, we talked previously on the pre-show here about how back in 2015 things were not the same way, even from the Untappd app perspective, to what it's like in the UK. You've been there for a little bit of time. What have you seen from the progression in terms of styles and differences of a brewing techniques that has grown over the past that are really trending right now in the UK? Oh my goodness. When I first moved here, so I came from New York, and in New York, I was really chasing down all the cool beers. And
Yeah.
moving here, I kind of thought, okay, I knew I wanted to work at a bar. So I was like, right, I got to get to know all the different breweries. I have a notebook downstairs where I would write down, like, I remember writing about Buxton. Okay, they're based here. These are their main beers that they make. And at the time, there were some great UK breweries, but there were a lot of imports as well. And now I think we're seeing so many amazing UK breweries that almost like I don't really need to look outside of the UK anymore. The beer scene here has really rapidly caught on to what was going on in America, and we have some amazing breweries here.
Yeah, well, speaking of which, as a question just popped up in the chat here, and we're going to put you on the spot here because this is like asking who your favorite kid is, but we'll ask it anyways. Your favorite UK brewery and why, from Vladimir. Thanks, Vladimir, for the question.
Dang, I don't know if I can pick one favorite. I might put forward two. Can I?
That's
a
fine.
couple.
Let's do it.
I'll pick a couple. The one that always comes to mind first for me is the Colonel, which is here in London. And they got started, I believe, in 2010, so kind of early days for the UK beer scene. But their beers are phenomenal. So if anyone comes to the UK, you must seek out their beers. They do everything, and they do everything well. So their table beer is a 3% pale ale, and it's kind of the one that, you know, if you don't want to drink for the night, but you want to have a tasty beer, that's the one people go for. But they do amazing IPAs. They've got a rye IPA, a black IPA. Then they've got incredible saisons and sour beers, and everything is so simplistic with the packaging. Like it's just like a brown paper bag, basically. So a brown paper label that says the Colonel on there and the style, and it's all about what's in that bottle. It's all about the beer for them. And the beers are absolutely incredible and super tasty. So I would highly recommend the Colonel. And then sort of off the back of that, another brewery for me that I kind of see as like my next Colonel in a sense is Burning Sky. They're based out in Sussex. And again, same thing, like amazing saisons. They have one with gooseberries in it. They've got one with elderflower in it. But then they also do a really lovely table beer and pale ale. Oh, a really great imperial stout too. It's a bit hot for that. So that's kind of why I forgot about it. But yeah, I would say those two breweries. I also love Duration. They're really worth checking out. Lost and Grounded, who I'm drinking tonight. They're out in Bristol. Some other London breweries I love would be Orbit. They do this really great Kolsch called Nico. That's perfect beer for a day like today. Wildcard, they've got an amazing passion fruit Gosa. When I tried it, it was on one of my episodes of my podcast. It had been recorded, my reaction to that beer. Amazing. So yes, I could go on, but I'm sure someone might have some more questions. But if you can't tell by my excitement, there's some amazing beer here in the UK.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to travel across the pond in a long time, but I have tried the Colonel when I went over there, and it was amazing as well. And so I definitely agree with you on that. I just think that the scene has just skyrocketed. We were talking earlier on the show about the popularity of Untappd in the UK, and it's definitely up there in the top 5. London and Manchester obviously are doing very well from a check-in perspective, but Untappd may be there, but the beer is like the headliners at a concert, right? So like they are the ones that actually are driving the excitement there. So it's great to see some of the great breweries and the beers come out there. So thank you so much for your question, Vladimir. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's go to another question here. This was from Adrian. Adrian asks, what does Nat think of the UK cask beer or real ale? Or is she normally a craft drinker mainly?
If you live here, you have to love cask beer. I think as a beer geek and sort of a bit of a beer history buff, I have so much appreciation for British brewing traditions. So yeah, it's frustrating when people hear, cask beer described, and people often say back, oh, but isn't it warm and flat? And you're like, no, not at all. It's like, if you, again, talk through a bit of the history of it, so it's served at cellar temperature, which is 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's not warm. If it was 55 degrees outside, people in California would have their Ugg boots on. So it's not, it's not toasty. And then in terms of flat, it is slightly lower in carbonation, but that's because of the way it's prepared, which is part of the magic of this style of beer. So it arrives to the pub cellar and it's still fermenting. So all of this carbonation is still developing inside the vessel. Then what they do is that the cellarman will vent it. So all of the excess CO2 comes off, and then it kind of levels out based on atmospheric pressure to about 1 volume of CO2. So most beers are sort of 1.5 to 2.5 volumes of CO2. So like for 1 can of beer, you would have 2 cans worth of gas compressed in there. So for cask beer, we've only got 1 can worth of gas compressed in there. That doesn't mean it's flat. It's definitely still got carbonation. And because it's not overly bubbly, then it allows you to really experience the flavors in the beer, which are typically quite malt forward or lovely, like more subtle British hops. Yeah, I think if anyone has tried cask beer and doesn't like it, call me next time you come here and I'll take you to the right place, because it deserves to be appreciated because, again, it's so iconic to British brewing.
Yeah, in New York, when I used to live in New York, we used to have a bar we used to go to, the Pony Bar, and Dan's been on the show before. They had real cask ale there. Now, if you're watching and you're not familiar with the term real ale, that's what in the UK it's called from a cask perspective. But it's a different style. Obviously, you mentioned not a lot of carbonation there. It definitely will throw you off if you go over to the UK and you have this for the first time and you're not exactly sure what you just had. You're like, this is wrong with this. But if you give it a chance, you will definitely come to fruition for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's worth trying once you know what you're looking for and what to expect.
Awesome. Let's go to another question from Simon. A lot of questions here. And in case you joined us late, we're talking to Natalya Watson, who is an event cicerone, Beers with Nat on Twitter. There's a lot of stuff in a book. We're talking about the book today as well that she's authored as well. So be sure to ask a question in your chat, Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, wherever you're watching. We'd love to put up on the screen here. This one is from Simon. And Simon asks, what style of beer do you think UK breweries do best that can't be found elsewhere to the same standards?
Oh my goodness. Well, cask beer for sure.
Agree there.
And I guess, I would say it probably is the traditional British style. So best bitter, even mild. I think some people have tried to kind of bring mild back, which I love. So mild is a nice counterpoint to the best bitter. It's milder in bitterness, so more malt forward as a style, typically quite low in alcohol as well. I think those traditional British styles are really well made here. And when I have tried them back in the States, when I go back home to visit, they're not quite the same. I don't know what the difference is. Part of it is the serve. Being served on cask is quite unique to the UK. But I think those styles are really great. And another thing too, the London Porter, which, or English Porter, I should say, but I most often think of Fuller's London Porter as a classic example. Yeah. In America, we put so many hops and things. We want it to be so flavorful and, so over the top. But here in the UK, like subtlety is kind of appreciated in a different way. And the Fuller's London Porter has this lovely sort of caramelly, chocolatey, milk chocolate thing going on. And it's soft and rounded and it's really easy drinking. It's like chocolate milk. So I think that's another good example of a style that in the UK, like, the subtlety is appreciated, but that's not to say we're not making amazing New England IPAs here and crazy imperial stouts and sour beers too. But I think in terms of traditional styles, that's what I most like about them, that I think the UK does really well.
Couldn't have answered any better. There you go. Well, speaking of hazy, there's another question in here we saw from Stuart, and Stuart has asked, hazy or clear beers? What's your take on this whole hazy revolution? Obviously, being from New England, which I am on the Northeast here, I have my own personal views, but I'm just curious about your thoughts across the pond on hazies versus the clear debate.
Yeah, I mean, I love all beers. So for me, I will happily drink a well-made New England IPA. I think some beers are hazy and they're not so great. But if it is intentionally hazy and made the right way, I'm, definitely up for it. And like, I love a Belgian wheat beer or a German wheat beer, which are intentionally hazy as well. So I don't think hazy beers are totally new to people. But definitely here in the UK, so many people were trained that if your cask beer is cloudy, it's bad. So I think there is kind of this understanding or sort of fear of hazy beer, which is a bit misplaced, because of course, if you have sort of kicked up your cask and the sediment has roused, you don't want to be drinking that. So you don't want to be drinking it when it's cloudy. But if it is an intentionally cloudy style, it can taste really great. So I think it is just about informing the consumer as to what to expect. But yeah, there's a place for both, definitely. And I'm a fan of both.
Agree, especially on a hot summer day like this, in my opinion. A nice clear Pilsner, a Czech Pilsner, or something, a lager, a nice lager would definitely be an amazing quenching of thirst for me, not a hazy IPA. But
agreed.
I definitely agree with that. Stuart, thank you so much for your question here. Let's go to another question here. They keep coming in here. This one is from DocuCat. Question: I never liked sour beers. I'm a big fan of sweet or Belgian style beers. If you had to choose one sour beer to try to win me over, what would it be?
So I would say a Creek, because it's sour, but it's got loads of sweetness. So if you don't go for the Oud Creek, the most traditional, that tend to be quite tart, you can start with ones that have a little bit of sugar added to them. But I love Boone Creek. It's not sweetened, but it's about 4%. It's got so much rich, sweet cherry flavor. I recently introduced it to a friend who's not much of a beer drinker, and she said it tasted a bit like cherry children's medicine. So not to insult it in any way, but to give you the idea of how much cherry flavor is in there. I think it's a really good gateway sour. It's a beautiful bright pink color. It's got loads of cherry on the nose. Like, people think that that's what beer should taste like. So I think if you like the sweetness and you like Belgian style, start with that one. And then soon you can start sort of peeling back the layers and move away from the sweeter versions to the drier versions that then have a bit more funk and more acidity in there. So hopefully that works for you.
Yeah, that's a great answer, because I actually do not like sours either. And
so give it a go.
I'll have to take this advice and give it a go. My biggest fear with sours, I'm not really a big candy guy, and a lot of sours, you get that kind of puckeringness within the back of your cheeks. And for me, I agree with the Creeks. I've had them before. Haven't found the right one just yet, but they're not as sour in your face and more on the lines of sweet, which are definitely helpful from there. I know I get flamed on that comment every time I say it here in the United States about me not being a sour fan, but it's like beer. You have to find your beer of choice, and then once you get that, everything else will fall. So don't hate. Just like
there are so many beer options. I think that's what people think. Oh, you must be a sour fan, or a very bitter IPA fan. No. There's a beer style for everybody.
Exactly. Well, let's shift gears here for a second here and talk a little bit about some of the training and consulting and beer tasting events that you kind of work on. Obviously now within COVID, no one's really doing many events whatsoever, but kind of take us through a little bit about how that process works and what some of the events you've been involved with in terms of how that works with your educational aspect of what you do.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, I just want to talk to people about beer. So anyone that will have me, some of the things I was doing sort of when we could before all of this happened was speaking at trade shows, speaking at festivals, doing tastings, either so trainings for bar staff or just doing tasting events for consumers. And interestingly, I had never considered doing an online tasting. One of the things I love most about beer is sharing it in person with people and knowing you're drinking the same beer. But, realizing what's happened in the world and the fact that we can't do these sorts of events anymore, I sort of pivoted and started doing more online events, and they've been absolutely incredible. And like this, we can have people from around the world connect with us and share a beer. So unfortunately, here in the UK with lockdown, on March 16th, we were told to avoid pubs and social gatherings. And on March 19th, I had a very large social gathering planned in a pub, which was my book launch. So that unfortunately had to be called off. And then on the 21st, all the pubs had to close from then until July 4th. So during that time, we had loads of beer lovers sat at home. So I started a virtual book club and met every week with some beer fans to go through my book, one chapter a week as sort of a director's cut. And after that, at the end of April, people were like, we want to keep doing this. We want to keep seeing each other and drinking together. So then I started a lockdown beer school, and we got together every Thursday and talked about a different topic, whether it was cask beer or Belgian beers or how to taste a beer and do sensory evaluation. And it's been absolutely incredible. So from, speaking at a podium to a big group of people at a trade show, which we can't do, it's been so great to do things like this, to connect with people and still share our love of beer.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. This show started out as exactly what COVID gave us with, I usually go around, do the same thing that you just talked about, but from the app side. And now we can't do that. So, finding a way to connect with people is a primary driver of these individual shows. And it's great to see that is being carried out on other avenues as well. There's nothing going to beat being in person with an individual and grabbing a beer, but unfortunately it's the best thing to do for this time of need, especially with the situation that we're in. Speaking of, you talked about how the pubs in the UK opened up on July 4th. How has it been since reopening? Has there been more stricter social distancing in place? I mean, what is that experience like? Because from us on the US, we're definitely still not in the area where we want to be from a COVID perspective, but bars are still not open completely. So I'm curious how London and UK areas have kind of tried to distance themselves from the situation.
Yeah, so all the pubs were able to reopen here for indoor drinking and outdoor drinking from July 4th, but you have to have social distancing measures in place. So everything needs to be at least 1 meter plus apart. And then, have provisions in place for sort of one-way routes through the site and hand sanitizer available and loads of signage to tell people, to keep their distance and that sort of thing. Right. The big change for us here in the UK is there is no vertical drinking. So you must be seated to drink and you can't stand at the bar. So that really limits capacity. So yes, while sites are open again, I think people are very slowly coming out into public again. And then also, bars are in no way going to be able to make what they could have previously with such a reduced capacity. And also, interestingly, so many breweries then, because they had to switch to small pack. So everybody's doing cans or bottles. Very few breweries are actually producing kegs. So even for the pubs that are open, they're having a hard time getting kegged products. But the slightly scary thing is, unfortunately, schools are due to reopen next month. And there's kind of these whispers that some politicians are suggesting that pubs need to close for schools to reopen safely. So we are very much still in the thick of it at the moment. Yes, pubs have reopened, but at reduced capacity with much, lower numbers of footfall coming through. But then also there is this slight risk that maybe they may need to close their doors again. So it's a very tricky time for the UK industry. I mean, many breweries pivoted, like we've seen in the US as well, with selling direct to consumer. And again, so many of them got a canning line in the beginning so they could then continue to sell their products. So I think people are trying as best as they can to get by, but we're certainly very much in the middle of it as well here in the UK still.
Absolutely. I think one of the weirdest things about all this is that the pubs and the restaurants are the ones that are affected the most in terms of these situations because of the fact that they have to simply change their whole business model. Being over in London, I think I remember just the pubs itself being so tiny and quaint, and that's just the appeal of it. And now those tiny and quaint places are not the ones that people can actually spend time in because of the fact they have to have that distancing in effect. So it must be hurtful for them. But hopefully, things will improve. And obviously the breweries are doing okay in terms of that aspect with the direct to consumer and selling, or is there murmurings around that part of being in trouble as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sales are definitely significantly lower going to direct to consumer as opposed to doing the volumes you could whenever you're selling lots of kegs into many different sites. But also, interestingly, especially here in London, so many pubs haven't reopened because London is kind of a ghost town in certain parts, places that were big commuter hubs. If everyone's still working from home and their offices haven't reopened, areas like King's Cross or Vauxhall, these places that would have loads of folks coming in every day who would get their after work pint before going home, they're just not there. So those pubs haven't reopened. So again, there is still, I think, breweries are doing what they can. I think it is important to stress that, we're certainly not drinking as much as we could have because we just don't have the outlets to, for them to sell as much beer as they used to previously.
Makes perfect sense. Well, let's shift gears to another topic here, talking about your podcast as well. One of the things that is so interesting about all the stuff you do is you have a 4-part mini series. They talk with women who are professionals in other careers, but beer is their beverage of choice. Talk us a little bit about how that started with that series there, and a little bit more about your podcast in general.
Yeah, so the Beer with Nat is my podcast and my social media handle and just my life at this point. So Beer with Nat, the podcast, started in October 2018. And the idea for that really was to just start talking to women who work in beer about their experience. I wanted to be able to share for people what it was like as a woman in beer. Again, I think a lot of people still think like, oh, geez, are there even that many women that drink beer or that work in beer? And once you get into it, you realize there are tons of us here. Why do people think women don't drink beer, So I wanted to then just have these women around for a beer. So the first couple friends, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to make you dinner. Come around for a chat with me. We'll share a beer. And so the whole idea is to really talk about what they do in the industry, so what their jobs are. And I've got everything from, brewers to quality assurance managers to packaging managers to PR people. So all different perspectives. Then we talk about how they got into the role. So for so many people, again, you may love beer and want to work in it, but don't know your way in. And whatever you've done before, I was in baby food, whatever you've done before, you can use those skills to find your way into beer. So we talk about those sorts of things. And then we talk about why they love being a part of the beer industry. So it's kind of using, personal stories to engage people and allow them to learn more about the beer industry, particularly for women, to help make them feel a bit more comfortable if they have any sort of confidence issues around wanting to get more into beer. But then I decided to do this little mini series where instead of talking to women who work in beer, I've talked to 4 women who don't work in beer but love it. Because then I was finding, do people think that it's only women who work in beer that love it? I want to show that you can do anything and love beer. Right. So I've got an actress, an archivist, a podcaster, and a broadcaster as my 4 guests for this mini series. So it started last week. So there'll be a new one out tomorrow. And then the rest of August, every Wednesday, there'll be a new episode out. So that's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can find it there and hopefully listen in.
Very cool. I think it's very interesting, especially when talking about different types of diversity when it comes to beer. It's always great to have different perspectives. And I think that, there is a kind of an attitude that sometimes, women don't drink beer, which is totally not true in any way, shape, or form, but maybe it doesn't get highlighted as much. So it's great to see some podcasts specifically tackling those issues and talking them through there when it comes to these things. So very cool. So make sure you all watch that and listen to that wherever you can listen to on your podcast preference of choice. Let's go to a couple more questions here before we wrap things up here. This one is from, we got a lot just came in all of a sudden. So let's say it's from the Froggy Town, and it says, what Swiss breweries do you know, or reworded in a sense, what are your favorite Swiss breweries from that perspective on that front?
It's funny. So I was talking to Greg before we got started. I haven't used Untappd in a while. I got my Untappd account in 2013 and I used it up through 2015. And then I moved to London. And so we were kind of saying, I just don't think a lot of the breweries I was checking the beers in for were on there for the UK when I first moved here. But my last check-in is from BFM, Saison, the square root of 225 Saison, which is one of my favorite Saisons. Absolutely delicious. Saison's my favorite style. So I think that's why I love Colonel and Burning Sky and this one from BFM. But I have to admit, BFM is the only Swiss brewery that I know. So if I need to know more, tag me at Beer with Nat on any social media. Feel free to educate me, and I'm happy to learn more about them.
Very good. Here's another question from Adrian. Adrian, another second-time question here. So it's big show person, it appears. Any ambitions to brew yourself or open a brewery? We get this question a lot with people in the media industry. What's your take on this?
I have homebrewed a few times. I had some friends in New York City, Evan Unger, Marissa Magno. I moved into Marissa's apartment and she left all her homebrew stuff behind. So if they wanted to homebrew, they had to come see me. And they talked me through everything. I did my first, I remember buying my first ingredients for homebrewing and someone was like, yeah, do you want me to mill the malt for you? And I was like, guys, do I want them to mill the malt for us? What's going on? I don't know what's happening. So I would say homebrewing was amazing to understand the brewing process. What happens in a brew day? What is actually happening during each step? How long does it take to make beer? But I have to say, at the end of it, having a ton of the same beer did not interest me, particularly if it didn't taste very good or if it was flat, those sorts of things. So I don't love homebrewing. I would rather leave it to the pros. I didn't actually ever have ambitions to open a brewery. I thought I wanted to open a bar. So my initial plan was to move to the UK, work in a bar for 4 months, and then move to Seattle and open my own bar. That was my plan. And I have been here since I moved, so that plan didn't go ahead as I had imagined. But no, I don't have any interest in opening a bar now. Now that I've worked in one and kind of really seen how it works, it's a lot more work than it looks.
That's very true. So we'll see about that. Here's another question from Vladimir. Another question. What UK city other than London would you recommend a beer geek to visit? It's a good question because I think when people think of the UK, they think of London as that big beer scene that's bustling, but there are plenty of other breweries, other cities. What would be your pick there?
I can't make a decision between Manchester and Bristol. They both have loads of really great breweries to choose from. If you go up to Manchester, of course, you've got Cloudwater, which is one of our main breweries that most people know of here in the UK. Track is up there too. Lots of smaller breweries as well. Then you've got Marble, who own the beautiful Marble Arch, which is this, Victorian boozer, but they do loads of really modern beers as well, and loads of great, interesting cask beers. So that, you can just walk around Manchester and take in so much. But Bristol has some really amazing breweries too. So Lost and Grounded, who I'm drinking today. Then we've got Good Chemistry out there. They've got a little pub out there as well. I mean, there are loads of different breweries, again, all within walking distance. So you come to London, check off those breweries, and you just get a train out to one of the two places, stay there for a night, walk around, take it all in. Again, definitely when you are able safely to come visit the UK, please do. There's so much great beer here.
Awesome. Seeing a lot of chatter about York as well is a good one. York is a good one to visit. So that's a good one to mention as well. A lot of good comments in there for the situation here. One thing we haven't talked about is a person asked about Brewdog as well, being more prominent in the UK. I think from a US perspective, Brewdog has been one of those elusive breweries and opening up their location here in Columbus, Ohio, and the States here with the hotel. We recently did some data polls and found that it's the most checked in IPA in the world in the last month of July there. So what do you kind of attribute to the success of Brewdog's being explosion in the United States, what being so popular in the UK? I think, is it seen as a big brewery in the UK as much as it isn't here? What's the kind of view of it from a local perspective?
Yeah, well, I want to hear your thoughts on it because I know they came to the States, but I don't know how it's been perceived there. So definitely here. When I first moved here, actually, they were already quite big then in 2015. And my Untappd profile photo is from the Brewdog bar in Glasgow, where I had a taster flight and I remember having their black IPA and being like, oh, this is amazing. So when I first tried some of their beers, I was really wowed by them. These days, I can't say I drink all that much Brewdog. They're very bitter and that's not really my taste preference. But yes, they are definitely seen as a very big brewery here. They are still independent and they are quite proud of that and use that definitely in their marketing, but you can get their beers in many places. So I think for a lot of people, it's a good gateway beer. People think, oh, what's an IPA? What's punk IPA? And they want to give it a go. And then from there, that may be their first IPA and kind of can open them up to this amazing world of beers. But I'm really interested to know, so their scene is very big here and they clearly have big expansion plans. And I know they opened their facility in Ohio. Are they seen as big in the States? How has that been received?
I don't think so. When I went over to London, I was blown away by in the
Their
early
prevalence.
2010s, all their pubs, and the
Yeah.
fact you can go in there and have a beer with them. And it's like, we didn't have that in the United States. It didn't exist. I remember coming back, I wish they would come over to the United States. I think when they came over, they're still kind of viewed as independents. They're local. They really market themselves as a local U.S. brewery, because a lot of the beers that are made by them that are exclusive are U.S. branded. So on Untappd, we have the Brewdog, main brewery, which is the Punk IPA, the original one. But they're a U.S. exclusive. They brew in the United States, that they market themselves as your local brewery. So it's interesting from that perspective on that side. I mean, I think most people in the United States are still considering them to be small because they're not available as everywhere like there is in the UK. But for the most part, they're definitely a new explosion for a lot of people, considering that they've made that big landfall in Ohio, and then have that hotel attached to it as well. And the marketing aspect of Brewdog is very appealing to many people.
Yeah,
they're loud.
Exactly.
So that's pretty good. I mean, I think from my perspective too, I have had enough of their beers to give a quantitative analysis, I guess you could say, on them. But I definitely like their Punk IPA stuff. I think it's still a very solid beer. But in the US, I think it's still early from that perspective. It's not as big as it is in the UK on there from that side. So.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how it's received and how it grows.
Yeah. Let's do one more question here. This one's from Brett. And Brett asks, as a fellow American in the UK, up in Scotland, where lots of great beers are made, I miss American-style brew pubs and tap rooms. What do you miss most about the beer scene from the States?
Oh, dang, that's interesting. I think
it was actually opposite, to be honest with you. I miss more of the London style being American, but I'm curious what you think of this question.
Well, okay, you go first. What are you missing from London, from your experience?
I feel like we talked about earlier about the fact that you have these small, quaint little spots in these areas in the London area in the UK. They don't have that in the United States. All about space and being able to blow it as big as you possibly can, and less about the old style ales and you walk in, you feel like you're actually in a pub. That's what I miss the most about those things over there. In the United States, it feels like, it feels like if your bar's the biggest, if you have the most taps, that's where you got to be. And I prefer more of a quiet hole in the wall myself. That may be my personal view, but what do you think about that question?
Yeah, I think for me, it is some of the beers, but I think it's mostly out of nostalgia. So again, Deschutes Mirror Pond was one of the first beers that got me into beer, and Pliny the Elder from Russian River. I miss those breweries. Their beers are amazing. Anytime I go home, I will go to the supermarket. Well, my parents are actually in Northern Ireland now, but anytime I go to see my brothers in California, I'm like, right, off to the supermarket, let's get a 6-pack of Mirror Pond. So I think for me, it is mostly the beers that I know and love that I can't get. And I love Perennial. I love Allagash. Again, some of those things that we can't get over here. Is there anything about the scene that I would say is different? I think actually what's amazed me is, again, which this is a brilliant example of, is one of the reasons I love beer so much is because it brings people together. So similarly, whether you walk into a bar by yourself in America or you do it here in the UK, if you start talking to someone else who's a beer lover, you instantly have a connection. There's instantly something to bond over. So I think the scenes are a lot more similar than you might think, because the people that populate it are the same, in the sense that we all love this product and we're here to enjoy it together. So as soon as you start talking to someone, you're like, oh, you got to go to this place. You got to check this out. Have you tried this brewery? So I think that's the bit that is consistent between both that I really love. Yeah,
very, very cool. I have to agree that, one of the things that was really great about being in a pub is that whether you're alone or with friends, you're always going to find other people that have the same interests as you. Unfortunately, with COVID, that has been a very missing piece of my heart for a long time, for lack of a better word. But it definitely grew with that statement there. But well, thank you so much, Natalia, for being part of our discussion today. I had a lot of fun talking about the UK beer scene, about your book, and a lot of other things related to beer. I think hopefully the audience out there had a great time too. So thumbs up if you liked it. Hopefully smash that like button. I'm not going to do that. That's YouTube speak. We're not going to do that. I want to give you an opportunity to give any final shout outs, Natalya, for where people can find you on the internet. And if you're interested in her book, we'll put a link in the description on YouTube to be able to see more information about that. But I want to give you the floor.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So if you want to learn more about beer, basically I will talk to you about it on any platform possible. So I've got the book, which is a taster's guide through the history of beer. I've got the podcast, which is sort of more human interest about people who work in beer and their stories. I've got a YouTube channel dedicated to beer education. on Instagram, which is Beer with Nat. I do little 1-minute videos about beer styles if you've got a short attention span. And then if you want to become a beer sommelier or start on the Cicerone path, I am launching a virtual beer school starting on September 3rd. And that's open to anyone from around the world based on my lockdown beer schools and sort of the success of bringing people together for a weekly chat about beer. We are all going to meet for 12 sessions to then hopefully get you ready to take the certified beer server exam. So you get that lovely certificate at the end of it. So that's on discoveringbeer.co.uk or on any of my social platforms at Beer with Nat. You can find out more about that and hopefully sign up and come learn about beer with me. So yeah, that's me. Thanks for having me, Greg. I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. I had a great time. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for watching our special UK week. This is just the first day. We got 2 more amazing guests that are coming on this week. So don't go anywhere. Tomorrow we're talking with Steve Dunkley, who is the founder of the Beer Navarro, which is a Manchester bar, and we're going to talk to him about all the great things that he's working on up there. We talked about Manchester being another city that you want to go visit for some great British beer out there. Then also on Thursday, we're talking to Matthew Curtis. He's the co-founder of editor-in-chief of Beer Insider and also the new Pelican magazine that he talks about as well on his Twitter account. So we're gonna have amazing guests this week, all at 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. British Standard Time. Hope you'll see us tomorrow at 3 p.m., 8 p.m. for another discussion on a virtual happy hour. Thank you so much for watching, and cheers, everybody.